Then we go back a year later, and we did this for 5 years in a row with Joe. So we'd have lunch with him once a year, and then once a year he'd look at where our business was at, he'd look at the numbers and say, okay, you're still not ready. Do this, this, and this, and probably give us like a top three things that we need to go do. And then Joey and I would go back to the drawing board, put those things in place, and then
I'd like to start by the beginning. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what was the founding vision for Dallas Lightning, and how did you guys identify the architectural lightning space as your niche? I'd love if you can give a bit of background on your story there.
Sure. I'd love to tell you it was this incredible visionary story. I was dreaming one night and then this vision came to me. That's not at all what happened. The story is that my father-in-law started a company in 1999. He basically took a bankrupt lighting company and put it on the TSX stock exchange. Do not ask me how he did it. No one knows until this date how he figured it out. He's a very smart man financially. I think the regulations wouldn't allow for that type of deal in this day and age. But he put it on the public market. And at that point, he started growing through mergers and acquisitions, started raising funds. My father-in-law is a wonderful salesman, very, very smart man. He knew how to go there and pitch the company to investors. So a lot of people got very interested in the model and were investing money into the process. And as the company grew, he was buying between my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my brother-in-law, who were all also the founding partners. The three of them, started building this company, started buying different businesses, and then eventually grew it quite significantly. And it was going well enough, but realistically, we didn't have the operational foundation that this type of business needed. We also had a massive head office with all these crazy salaries and all these crazy costs. And you're buying these individual businesses and they're doing really well on their own. And now you have all these extra expenses and where's the synergies and how are they going? So then there was a company that we probably shouldn't have bought in 2006. The recession started in 2007. And then those two factors combined made it that there was a spectacular crash where the entire company came crumbling down basically within a year. 2008 was not a fun year for the family. And 2009, my brother-in-law and I, Joey, had a chance to buy back three divisions, basically 10 cents on the dollar, and relaunch a new company. But at that point, those companies were a mess. My wife was pregnant, who's Joey's sister. His wife was pregnant. We had no money. We took second, mortgages on our homes, whatever we can find, and put that money into the new business and just started in quite a naive way. Now that we look back, sometimes we think to ourselves, wow, that was crazy. And there was a little bit of a vision, but there wasn't this long-term vision of growth. And at that point, LEDs didn't even really exist in our market. So we're still on old school lighting fixtures. So yeah, it was a bit of a rocky start, let's just say.
A big leap of faith by two young guys who wanted to be entrepreneurs and saw an opportunity and decided that they wanted to risk. And it's interesting. So did the other part of the business like continue doing business as well, and it was like kind of a carve out of that division between
Yeah,
you
we
and Joe?
carved out those three divisions, and then two other divisions got bought back by old owners,
Okay.
and they restarted their businesses, and so we just kind of split away, and we're really our own new entities at that point.
Okay, amazing, amazing. So what was that what was the timeline of like this initial, like you guys in like carve it out at what during what
So
year?
we shipped our first order on June 22nd, 2009. So that
Okay.
was when our first order went out to Home Depot. One thing that was really big for us was that in that transition, we had Home Depot Canada, who's been an amazing partner even to today. And at that point, they decided to support us in relaunching the company. So that was a really big deal for us. We convinced them to kind of give us back the initial contract, which I was surprised they would do because we had done very poorly for them over the last year before that. But we had a great buyer. She was very, willing to give us a second chance. And that really kind of kicked us off on the right foot.
Amazing. Amazing. So, and I know you're, Shawn, you're a big like advocate of the scaling up methodology. So can you say a few words about what it is and what specific aspects of scaling up were the most transformative for your business as you been scaling Dallas Lightning with using that method?
Yeah, I'll give a very quick summary. Scaling up comes from an idea from a man called Vern Harnish. He's an amazing entrepreneur who started this concept in the US. His first book was actually called The Rockefeller Habits. where he took the Rockefeller family and took away everything that they did successfully, turned them into a book and a concept. Then it went to something called gazelles. And the definition of a gazelle is a company that grows 15% per year for 5 years in a row, which means you double your business. It's kind of this controlled, profitable growth that you're going for, and not just, doubling and tripling the business. And then it moved to the scaling up methodology. So scaling up basically has four big pillars, which we believe is in every single business: people, strategy, execution, and cash. So when you look at those four big pillars, some companies will be really strong at those pillars. Some companies will be weaker in certain elements. It really depends. And so we took that methodology. We brought in a coach at that point, an amazing coach who's still doing a great job today, Cleo Maheu. And she could speak French. That was a really big criteria for us. She was the only French coach at that point. Our company in Blainville was quite francophone, so we needed to have someone who could really speak the language. So Cleo came in and brought the methodology with her, and we put that into the business. By far, the biggest transformative element, and it's funny because I think this is the case for most companies, was the people and culture side. So we, inherited these 30 employees. Now we're up to about 60. But when you bring in employees from an existing business, especially when you're young and you don't really know what kind of culture you're trying to build, you just accept everyone, you accept whatever, comes with them, and you don't really think through what that's going to do to your company culture. And it took us about 3 years to realize that our company culture was not what we wanted it to be. And it was at that point where we started looking into high level hiring techniques and talent assessment techniques to really understand what kind of players we had in the company, step up our game on the hiring process, and basically change anybody who didn't truly believe in our vision, which was really crazy. But we ended up changing about 85% of the team
Wow.
over 5 years, give or take.
Amazing. And I know that often like for small and medium businesses that are growing, that are scaling up, some business owners will recognize that talent can be transformative, but they're afraid of doing the leap of faith of investing more to bring more senior talent. So what would you say, like, I mean, you guys have shifted like your talent and replaced a lot of people, but how did you do that progressively so it makes sense to bring like that next talent that maybe costs a little bit more but brings like tons more value? So how did you guys go about that?
I think you have to look at it in two different ways. I think there's existing talent that you have in your organization. Most people don't know how to truly assess what they have today. And you could have some amazing team players. You could have some people who really don't fit what you're trying to accomplish. And then there's the idea of bringing in new people. When you're bringing in new people, the theory that I explained, and if you look at all the best companies in the world, they'll all tell you the same ratio. One top performing player, so let's call him an A player. I don't like using letters too much, but one, top performing A player will replace three B players. So when you're looking at salaries, it's not like you're going to pay that person three times
Yeah.
more than what they're worth. You may pay 15, 20, 25% more, but if they're truly replacing three or at minimum two average players, you're still coming out very much on top. I think people often don't understand that concept. But the bigger problem, Simon, is that people don't really know how to hire A players. That's a really, really important concept to learn and to figure out. When we've seen this labor shortage that's been going on in general, a bit of a lack of immigration and things like that. Generally speaking, when I go into companies, I see that, the talent isn't where it needs to be. And when I ask people, well, if you want to change people in this company, what percentage would you change? I always get about the same number. It's a shocking number, but it's anywhere between 50 and 60% of their workforce. And so when they say things like that, I ask them, well, why don't you do it? And they say, well, it's too hard to find strong people. And I say, well, 40% of your workforce is strong and you found them. So you don't think they exist? Because they obviously exist. And we have them in every single business in the province, and in the country. So it's just a matter of gaining confidence on how to bring in those A players.
Wow, that's honestly that's very very powerful message. And as we're gonna talk later on like probably some of the reason, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I would assume that when you guys sold your business, like talent and management was a big part of the transaction. So I will love to hear you on that. But before, Dallas Lightning, like a lot of other businesses that were sold, it wasn't an overnight success. Like you guys started, like you said, in 2009. So tell me a little bit more about like some of the challenges that you guys have faced as you were building that business and that make you the growth company that you are now. But like what was the challenges that you guys faced during that journey?
Oh, I think we need another 2 hours. You want to hear all the challenges, but some of the really big challenges. Number one, keep in mind we were coming out of a bankruptcy, so we had screwed over a lot of people, both financially and from a product perspective. And we're going back to those exact same customers. So you can imagine going back with your tail between your legs and saying, "Hey, by the way, I know I kind of screwed you over for the last 18 months. How about giving us a try and letting us start again?" So there was a lot of people in the market that didn't have confidence in us and didn't necessarily believe that we can turn the corner and have a successful business that's operationally sound and delivering product because we hadn't been delivering product for a long time. So for sure, that's absolutely one of the biggest challenges we had. Rebuilding our market reputation was huge. Secondly, cash flow was a disaster for us because you got to keep in mind the cash conversion cycle. And I know you deal with a lot of tech companies, Simon, and a lot of times tech companies, depending if you're in a startup phase or how you're trying to bring in, venture capital or private equity, but the business model often in technology is usually a bit of a better business model than manufacturing. Because for us, we were using overseas partners, and because we didn't have a good reputation, we had to give them deposits.
Yeah.
So now you think about that, 90 days before our product is even built, we're giving them a ton of money and then they're starting to make the product. They haven't ordered a screw at that point. By the time it gets made, it gets here overseas. We ship it to our clients, and then we give our clients terms. We had a cash conversion cycle that was about 7 to 9 months, which is a disaster for cash flow. So that was another huge challenge that we faced, and we had to really work closely on to reduce that cash conversion cycle. And there's a bunch of ways we did that. And then, because we didn't really have the right people in the right seats, operationally things were just not the way they needed to be. We weren't lean. We ended up eventually actually implementing a lean methodology, which I'm not sure if people fully understand what that is, but it's basically eliminating any waste that does not give direct value to your customer, because we just weren't operationally excellent the way we were delivering product. Inventory was always an issue, and just the way we would go to market. So those are, I'd say, probably the top three things we faced along the way.
Amazing. So cash conversion, lean manufacturing. Is there any like specific partners that were instrumental in helping you like address these things? Like I know that some people are not investing enough and some entrepreneurs are not investing enough in building relationship with bankers and financial partners. So any advice or any partners that were instrumental and you guys and for you guys to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, what's really crazy, Simon, is that for the first 3.5 years of our business, from 2009 to past 2012, no bank would support us. We couldn't even go and get a line of credit because of the bankruptcy. So we were using this concept called factoring. A lot of people don't know what factoring is, but it's basically a company that owns your receivables and they own your inventory, and then they basically give you money as you need it, but they're charging you anywhere between 10 and 12% interest on that money. So it's a bit like a bit of a legal mafia, if you want to look at it that way. But they were a good partner. And then, TD was really the first bank that came on board and supported us and said, you know what, we feel you're financially sound enough. We like your financial statements. Let's start getting you guys some financing. So that was definitely a huge help. Realistically, though, it was the scaling up methodology that led us to that, because that's what made us challenge our cash conversion cycle. So what we ended up doing at that point was consolidating our supplier networks. Instead of having 25, 30 different suppliers, we went down to kind of a 3 to 5 top suppliers to get a lot of buying power. And then we would negotiate just almost monthly and quarterly with them to say, hey, listen, this makes no sense. Why are we giving you a deposit? And they say, okay, forget the deposit. And then, we slowly worked that down, that cash conversion, to get into a very healthy place. And on the lean side, we had this amazing, amazing partner who I'm still very close friends with today. His name is Marc Chartrand. He's kind of semi-retired. He's hard to get a hold of now. He doesn't like going too far and helping too many people, but he was instrumental in helping us implement lean methodology in the business, which we didn't really know much about until he came on board and worked with our team. I'll give you one quick example. We had a manufacturing warehouse, and then we had a couple of technical people internally. They drew out the layout of our new space that we were moving into. And we're like, oh, this is a nice drawing and this makes a lot of sense operationally. And then Marc Chartrand came and he just started asking questions. It's like, oh, why did you put the people at the back? Isn't it going to be really long for them to go get all the inventory and go take their breaks and their, and we're like, oh yeah, why did we put the people at the back? He's like, why did you put your aisles, vertically? Why didn't you think about putting them horizontal? And he just started asking questions, and then literally we did a full 180. Like we literally completely changed the entire warehouse layout to the opposite of what it was. So that's what lean does, right? It's just a lot of questions. Will this make your orders go out quicker? Will your people be more efficient? And will your clients be happier? So, those are a couple of partners that we had that we're forever grateful for and still work with today.
I sense a common theme here, like bringing the right people, bringing the right talent, bringing the right consultants. So that's interesting and very generous of you sharing because a lot of people they see the success and they don't know the story and they think that it's very easy, but definitely you guys did like an amazing turnaround. So kudos to the team at Dal's. I'd love to maybe like move on and talk a little bit more about the actual process of, selling your business. I'd love to know how did that happen? And I believe that you guys have partnered with Richter as your advisory team to support you during the sales process. So, would love to maybe go back in time and walk us through like how did that process happen, that sell happen? That would be great.
Absolutely. So I think a process like that really comes down to mindset and where your mindset is at going through, building a company. Keep in mind, we were coming from a family bankruptcy, right? So for us, money was always very, very important. We were always making sure we were profitable month to month. We would never take unnecessary risks. You always take some risks, but we wanted to really do this profitable growth mindset and methodology. And we started thinking and discussing with a few different people, what does it take to sell your business and where are you going to get to? What does it look like? What multiples, can you go get? And so at that point, we had been introduced to Richter and we met Joe Lodico, who's, been a phenomenal partner and still a close friend today. And we still do tons of work with him. And Joe basically had lunch with us one time and, he started talking to us about how to sell a business and what it should look like. And we just talked and he said, you're very far from a sale right now. This selling now would be pretty useless for you guys. You're not making enough money. You don't have the right structures in place. And here are the couple of things you need to do. He said, let's talk in a year. And so then we'd go with our homework and then we'd start, putting into a bit of a management structure in place and getting a bit more organized with our client base and getting rid of bad clients and consolidating the suppliers and all the different things he told us to do. And then we go back a year later and we did this for 5 years in a row with Joe. So we'd have lunch with him once a year. And then once a year, he'd look at where our business was at. He'd look at the numbers and say, okay, you're still not ready. Do this, this, and this. And probably give us like a top three things that we need to go do. And then Joey and I would go back to the drawing board, put those things in place. And then, when COVID hit, things really did well for us because we were in the LED lighting business, but a lot of people were renovating and construction kind of picked up and was a big boom during COVID. And so when we had our lunch with Richter, maybe a year after that, a year or two after that, and then he said, well, wait a sec. Now you guys are actually more attractive. Your numbers are at the right place. It looks like your team's at the right place. I think we could start exploring it. So it's something that we had kept in mind for about 5 full years before actually getting to the process. And we just kept putting in the stepping stones and the building blocks to get there.
So was it a goal for you guys to at some point exit the business or how did that happen? Was it like a process that you guys said, okay, so we're ready. We want to go test like our enterprise value in the market, then let's start a process, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I think it had to do with the fact there's a double positive, you want to call it that, when you do this, right? One, obviously, you get to secure your financial future to a certain extent because you're going to sell a big chunk of the business. But if you can also find the right partners to help you in your growth, back you financially, back you strategically, it can lead to another, future exit potentially that could be positive as well. So for us, we weren't desperate, which I think is really important. You don't want to ever be desperate. I feel like the best deals we've ever made have been made because people were desperate. And in our case, we weren't, which is really great. So for us, it really allowed us to be careful, do it in a very dynamic way. And then at that point, we basically found the right strategy to go to market with. And we knew if we found the right partner, we could continue that growth trajectory. But that was really important, finding the right partner, because we hear horror stories about that as well.
So you guys ended up choosing BDG and Partners as the company that you would sell. And I understand that you sold part of the business to them and you remain or the some part of the management team remain like involved in that new business. Can you explain to people that are less familiar with private equity, how they work and like what was the specific like deal between, you and BDG? Like how did you find them? Did you consider other offers, and why did you choose to go with BDG?
One thing I would tell entrepreneurs off the bat is whatever you think your process is going to look like, you could just throw it in the garbage because it's not going to look anything like what you thought. Richter had also had an idea, but there's so many unknowns that happen once you go to the market. Richter had some very specific targets of individuals or bigger firms that would buy us, and none of those individuals ended up panning out. None of those companies and those firms ended up being the ones that were even interested in us, which is a little bit shocking. We ended up having, give or take about three different people at the end that were more serious. One lighting company in the US, a lighting company in Canada, and then BDG. Those were kind of the last three. We really thought we'd end up with a more of a strategic, when I say strategic, a partner who's in lighting. We thought we'd be part of like a strategic play. A lot of times, these bigger companies with private equity firms will have a platform company, and then they'll try to do more of these add-ons. We were still sizable, but we didn't know that we'd be a platform company for someone. And there had been a couple of transactions. I won't mention the names, but there's been a couple of big lighting transactions in Canada, and we thought one of those private equity firms would jump on us because we were so attractive, apparently. And when they looked at us and said, "Oh, you're not that attractive at all," like, "Oh, that's a bit of a slap in the face." We thought we were such a beautiful company, but sometimes they have different visions of what they want to do. For us, it had a lot to do with the fact that we were more of a residential focused business, and they were looking for maybe more commercial type businesses. And so when BDG came to the table, we very, very quickly realized how aligned we were in terms of values and vision. And I think that's really easy to say, but it's also incredibly rare. I don't think that often we end up really seeing or understanding how important that could be. It's so easy and cliche and cheesy to say, oh, you got to have vision alignment and your values have to be aligned. But when you actually find that in a private equity, it's a little shocking and it's a little, it's quite incredible. It's like, wow, okay, these people are like us. They think like us. They have a similar vision to us. We want to do the same things moving forward. The relationship kicked off in a very positive way very quickly.
Okay, amazing. And you've said a couple of things that resonated with me in the sense that, understanding what is the market valuing in terms of value creation. So commercial versus residential, that's definitely like if business owners can get that data in early on and understand like how their business aligned with what the market is valuing, that's key. But more importantly, I think that the whole like vision alignment that you guys found with BDG was also okay. I assume that there's also like a people like there's vision, but there's also I guess like people connection because my understanding from the deal is that BDG took over, but they let like the management in place. So you guys are still or part of the management team is still operating, dolls, but with the guidance now of BDG. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that was always the vision. The vision was never to sell the whole company, it was to stay partners. I'm, out of the business on the day to day, but I'm still close to the group and still an investor. Joey is still the president, so it's really fantastic. He gets to continue running the business with their support and their, financial savvy, and obviously, with their backing. And then our VP Chris is also one of the partners now. So yeah, they basically did not change a whole lot, which sometimes you get in there, you're scared what's going to happen and the continuity might be broken. They did a really good job at communicating. They would come, they would speak to the company and explain who they were and how they help us in our growth thesis. But really, from a strategic standpoint, lots of really cool new ideas, but nothing that was going to completely rock the boat. There wasn't these massive changes either at the top or at the bottom of the company. It was really a continuity play. So we were I could tell you that from the day it happened, like the next day, I don't think any of the employees would ever tell you, could even tell you the date that it happened, or because there was no big changes for them. They just came to work and things just continued in the right direction. And now we had a new partner in the business who could help us in our growth. So yeah, that was really, really important. Getting along with the owners over there with Christian, Jean-Loup, and Francois, and really making sure that we were aligned on how we were going to do this. It became a no-brainer once we figured out that we were that similar in our thought process.
And again, it's a concept that not all of our readers and listeners understand, but you've went through your fair share of challenges and you've been very candid and honest about like sharing those. And now you had that opportunity to monetize, all that blood, sweat, and tears that you guys put into the business and say, okay, so now I can get some money out of the business, sell part of my shares. But then, since we have a partner, a private equity that is very professional, share the same vision that what we have for the business and going to help us like grow it to the next level, I still have the opportunity to basically like, make another, monetization event down the road that could be worth even more than the first one that you've done. And I think that that's definitely like one of the reasons that if you are selecting the right private equity partner, it brings tons of value for an entrepreneurs. So speaking of that, like, can you share at a high level what's like you said that the day to day like before after the transaction, it's been pretty much like really smooth and pretty much the same thing. But where do you feel that BDG has brought the most value to Dal so far? Like, what would
There's a couple of really big pillars. I would say strategically, they bring a vision. They have 12 portfolio companies. So a bunch of them are much bigger than us. So they brought some really interesting ideas from these bigger companies on the way to go to market, on how to do things differently. Another thing that they bring is a network. They have just a really massive network of amazing people, anywhere from marketing to ops to, financials. And, they had some really cool people that brought in that could help us with our vision in a few different areas. And then the biggest play for us, I think, will end up being maybe more on the acquisition front, where it's very hard as any private business owner to just go there and do acquisitions. It's a very daunting thing. But when you have a company that knows what they're doing and sees how to go to market and what other complementary companies could come add value to DALs, that's a huge thing. And they're experts at that. We're not, right? So they're the ones who know how to go about and find targets and talk to the right people and what criteria to look at. And they have a financial team internally to analyze that. The one thing they helped us do was bring in a CFO. So we have a new CFO at DALS now, who's a great culture fit as well for us, Marc-André. So, we didn't have the financial expertise internally. So we brought in someone who could run that part. But I would say that's probably going to end up being, I would say in the next couple of years, the biggest play. Can we do a few acquisitions that really add value and synergize the business?
Amazing. So just if you can, share a bit of advice for entrepreneurs that are planning an exit, like generally speaking, like many founders are struggling with knowing when to sell or how to prepare. So what would you say are the key indicators that it's the right time to pursue an exit? And how can founders best position their business for success?
So a lot of things I could share there. The first thing is you shouldn't be looking at the right time. You should be making sure your business is ready to sell, regardless of the time. In the sense that timing is very hard to play. It's very hard to calculate. Oh, in 2026, it'll be the right time to sell my business. We couldn't predict what month or what years even would have been the right year for us to sell. So the approach that Richter took, that he said, you know what, if you want to sell in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, get ready now. So I would tell entrepreneurs, you should, I tell this to every company because I do a lot of coaching now. And when I go in there, I say, we're going to build your company to sell, even if you never want to sell it. We're going to build it so that you can sell it tomorrow morning. You need to be ready for a sale. So once it's structured that way, it'll give you much more freedom and much more happiness anyway. But we're going to build it to sell, and then you decide what you want to do with it. So prepare years in advance for a sale. Don't let it sneak up on you. I would say that is really number one. Understand what you want that sale to look like. A lot of people have different visions and they can change, and that's fine as well. But do you want to sell to a private equity and then do this play where you have a boss and that you can, go and do more with that boss? but you do have a boss, or you didn't have a boss before. Do you want to sell all your business? If you want to sell all your business and leave right away tomorrow morning, it's a little different. You have to set your business up a little differently. Your sale process will also be a little bit different because a lot of times these private equities do like some continuity. I mean, they can fly in a CEO if they want, but it's a little harder to do on team morale and the team structure. So that's really important. And even most importantly, I would say, start thinking about what you want to do after you sell. I think most entrepreneurs don't realize that their business is a big part of who they are. It's a big part of their soul. And when you sell your soul, um, you know, there's a lot of things that happen in your mind, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are not particularly happy after they sell because they've lost their baby and they maybe try something new or go into a new direction. It's not as fun. They no longer have the same hustle either that they had before. So I'd say those would be the top three things to keep in mind if you're going to sell one day.
So speaking of that, like now that you've exited, like what's like how was that for you, and what's next for you? Because you're out of the business, you're still involved, you're still a shareholder, but you're not like working in the business. So, and your brother-in-law is still like in the business as CEO. So tell us a little bit more about the dynamic and how was it for you to adapt to that situation?
For me, it was a little bit easier because I had already exited a couple of years before we actually sold the majority share. So for me, I was already somewhat out of the business at that point. So I wasn't too concerned in terms of the transition because I wasn't part of the day-to-day operations. I was already out there, being a scaling up coach and helping other companies grow, and then just supporting the company. I was coaching our DAL's business, which is super bizarre for us, but worked really, really well, because I had, some experience and understood where we were kind of going. But at the same time, the transition was a little bit easier for me. So that part wasn't too challenging, but I had kind of thought it through for quite some time. Um, but now I kind of miss it. I kind of miss running a business and being in the day to day. Still young, and so I'm keeping an eye out for other opportunities to maybe go back and kind of be fully, running a business. We'll see if that happens or not eventually, but it's definitely in my mindset and a potential avenue I'm exploring.
Interesting. So, role of the advisor. So, looking back, you've said a few times that you had like a really positive experience with Richter and Joe and his team. So, how critical was the role of the financial and tax advisors and deal advisors like Richter in achieving your successful outcome? And, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs about assembling their advisory team?
Uh, Absolutely crucial, absolutely essential. Can't live without it, especially if you're at a transaction size a size that's anything over, 5 to 7 to 10 million. You need to be super well surrounded. There are numerous, almost I'd say unlimited things that come up, complications. They say a deal dies. There's many different theories, 5 times, 7 times. I think our deal died. I think we calculated 6 times. Where we said, okay, I think this deal is dead, because of something crazy that happened with a lawsuit or with some type of customs issue. But when you have the right partners, that you're working with, and you have the right firms that are very, experts who really know what they're doing, they can always bring logic to the table. They can be an intermediary to discuss on your behalf. And the reality is that they know way better than you do, because they've seen a guy like Joe at Richter. He sees, deals every single week, right? He sees hundreds of deals in a year, whereas we're seeing one in our lifetime. So, we don't know what the heck we're doing and what certain things mean. And when we're trying to negotiate certain numbers, yeah, we can have an idea, but we don't have the true knowledge. So, for us, Richter was massive in terms of just supporting us. And Richter's a big firm, so they helped us with the due diligence. They helped us with tax planning. Really, really set us up for success. BCF was our law firm, so BCF, Pierre-Philippe Taché and his team were unbelievable in making sure everything was smooth on the legal side of things. So yeah, I would say those were the two most involved and biggest partners. Absolutely, couldn't have got the deal done without them. There's no way. There's
Can you give
absolutely no way.
can you give an example when you say like deal dies like 6 times, like
Yeah.
of how, an experienced advisor like Joe and Richter were able to like take that situation that without an advisor, maybe the deal would ne have never happened, and they managed to, kind of like reignite the conversation and continue with the deal.
Yeah, I mean, you picture something really big happens in the middle of the deal that could be, somewhat detrimental to your business, or let's say it brings in a big risk that wasn't there before. So then this big risk comes. Let's just call it a lawsuit, all right? Let's see. In LED lighting, there's all kinds of lawsuits that happen because of patent infringement and, with RGBs and all kinds of different things. So imagine that all of a sudden in the middle of your deal, this lawsuit comes in from this huge player in the market. And now you're like, ooh, okay. What does this mean, this lawsuit? It's not going to bankrupt us, but then they want royalties or they want to be paid out something. Now, does that lower the valuation of your company? Does that lower the valuation of the deal? As the sellers, you don't want to lose any value. You think you can make this work. And then how do you communicate that now to the buyer and make it so that they don't freak out and that there's a proper conversation here? That's where someone like Joe for us was there every step of the way to say, okay, I'll take this subject. Let me go talk to their team. He knows everyone in the market anyway. So on our behalf and with our support, and Joey was super involved as well, of course. So then, Joey gives information to Joe. Joe goes to have a conversation. Maybe there's a conversation with Joe and Joey. So then, like, with the team at BDJ and with their experts. So there was just a lot of hand holding and making sure that those things didn't get out of hand, didn't hurt the company valuation, didn't lower the money that we were expecting to get. Again, if you don't have someone representing you, then you have to go into all those negotiations on your own. You don't know what it means. You don't know what it should or shouldn't cost in the deal. So it was really great to have someone who just understood those details.
How long was the entire process from like LOI from BDG to actually like, closing?
It was just over a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we always hear the Cinderella story of like, 8 to 12 weeks, but sometimes like these deals take more time and there's so it's great that you shared that. Okay. Any final things that you'd like to share or any things that we've not covered that you'd love to maybe talk about? Or I think that we did a pretty good job at like looking at the different angles, but
No, I think we did a really great job covering it. Again, I think it's something that needs, don't be reactive is what I would tell entrepreneurs. Be very proactive. Sit down today and just figure out what's my vision, whether your company's 3 years old or 30 years old. It's not easy selling a business. It's very complicated. Finding the right partner, whether it's going to be an entrepreneur that you want to sell to or a firm, there's a huge difference between those two. So you have to have a vision of what kind of person you want coming into your business. And then I would say educate yourself. Go out there and start talking to smart people who are in the M&A world and just go have lunch. They'll buy you lunch if they see potential in you. Anyways, you get a free lunch and you get tons of knowledge. So just go have lunch with these individuals. You can find the right experts. I always tell people, they should sit down with Joe. Joe's probably the smartest guys in Canada. So just go have lunch with him, and understand how does it work and is your business at the right place and what you need to do to get it there. Be kind of a fire hose for learning. Just be open to hearing and understanding, and set yourself up the right way in advance.
well, I think that like closing remarks and maybe editorial like comment from myself is that I think that Joe and the Richter team has definitely been preaching what like doing what I'm preaching a lot to advisors, which is like if you want to be a trusted advisor, really like you need to invest in the relationship and you need to select, entrepreneurs and businesses that are serious, that will listen to your advice. And you need to kind of like, over time create a bit of value and build that trust. And guess what? Like 5 years later, when you guys were still ready and you had like 5 free lunch on Joe, well, you ended up selecting his firm to do the deal, and I'm sure it was a win-win deal for everyone. So
Yeah. I'm
uh,
sure we bought one of those lunches, but
uh,
probably not more than that.
probably the last one.
Maybe the last one.
But kudos to everybody involved. Shawn, amazing story. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, that's pretty much it.